My name is Jim Nielsen, and I'm one of the generative OH&S team of consultants. I'll introduce myself and tell you why I care about safety in a minute or two, but first there's a couple of points I want to make. Well, my first point is, whilst my background is Port Kembla Steelworks and heavy industry, the principles I'm going to talk about really apply to any labour-based organisation. The second point I want to make is that after I talk on each section in this presentation, I'm going to give you a chance to rate where you think your organisation sits. The idea is to give you a tool to help you prioritise where you should place your efforts when you go back on the job. As I said, my name is Jim Nielsen. I'm not a safety professional, I'm an operator. I left school at the age of 17 and started work with BHP at Port Kembla Steelworks with a metallurgy cadetship. I spent the first few years working in the labs, but by 1972 I realised if I wanted to go anywhere in the organisation I needed to make the jump to production. So I joined a new plant they were building called the BOS, Basic Oxygen Steelmakers. I joined it about 2 months before commissioning, and when that plant started up I went on shift as the most junior of the staff on shift. I was the relief of the relief of the relief. By 1976 I'd worked my way up to what they call a pit foreman. I had a crew of about 18 people, most of whom had English as a second language working for me. I stayed there for the next couple of years. Then I was asked if I wanted to join a new plant they were building next door called a slab caster. So in January 1978 I moved to the slab caster a year before that was commissioned, travelled overseas to learn how to operate the plant, help build it, commission it, train the operators, then went on shift as one of the original foremen when that plant started up late 1978. By 1982 I'd worked my way up to being what they called a general foreman. That meant I looked after a number of sections on shift work. In 1986 BHP decided to expand the slab caster by building 2 more plants, and I was asked if I wanted to join that commissioning team. So in early 1986 I went back onto day shift to help develop the operating procedures for number 2 caster. I trained all the operators in that plant and commissioned that plant. After the plant started up I stayed on day shift to help commission, help sort out the teething problems. In 1989 I was asked to take control of the Tundish area, which I did. In 1991 I was offered my first managerial position as caster services superintendent, meaning I looked after all the support functions for the slab caster. In 1998 that position was amalgamated with the steel treatment position, and I became the steel treatment and caster services manager. I left in 2009. Just to talk about some of the hazards I had. Lots of hazards. Molten metal, when steel comes out of the furnace, it's around 1700 degrees centigrade. Overheat cranes, I had 4 cranes working for me that could carry 470 tonne. Lots of mobile equipment, forklifts, large 988s, 992s, manual handling, electricity, gases, oxygen, confined spaces, you name it, we had it. Back in the 70s, before random breath testing, we'd often go for a beer after night shift. We'd go to a place called the Harp Hotel, which still exists in Wollongong. On the 18th of September 1976, I was a typical 24-year-old. You know the type, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I was at the foreman at the BOS, had a good job, earning good money, fit as a fiddle. I was playing first grade rugby, driving fast cars, drinking too much beer and enjoying life to the max. At 7:30 as I walked into the Harp that morning, a bloke was killed at work. If it had happened 20 minutes earlier, it would have been one of my people. The foreman that held his hand while he died was the foreman that relieved me so I could go for a beer. Bill was a few years older than me, and he'd mentored me a fair bit. He was never the same man after that. I saw what it did to Bill, and made me wonder what we missed and what we were doing wrong. It had a profound effect on me. I wasn't 10 foot tall and bulletproof anymore. From that time on, I always tried to manage my people safely, but I didn't know what I was doing, and my bosses couldn't help me because neither did they. When I first became a superintendent, I thought having 4 lost time injuries a year was doing a good job. It was certainly better than a lot of my peers, but again, I didn't know what I was doing. Then around 1993, BHP decided to get serious about safety, and they brought in some ex-managers with good safety performance records to give us some advice. These people had lots of buzzwords and sayings, and it was around this time that I heard the saying, you get the level of safety performance you demonstrate you want for the first time. To be honest, when I first heard it, and for a while after I first heard it, I thought, what a load of rubbish. After all, wasn't I Jim Nielsen? Didn't I have a reputation as one of the most safety-conscious superintendents in the steelworks? Didn't I always rate well at performance appraisal on time and safety? And I certainly wasn't happy with the level of performance I was getting. Gradually it dawned on me that I was doing a lot of talking, but not a lot of demonstrating, and I began to change the way first I, then my direct reports behaved. Remember I said I was having 4 lost time injuries a year when I first became a superintendent? By the time I left BlueScope Steel, I had over 2.5 times the workforce I originally had when I became a superintendent. The best result I achieved was over 7 years lost time injury free. Slab making, which my section was a part of, went over 7 million hours lost time injury free. Today I'm going to talk about what demonstrate now means to me. I'm going to tell you some stories, both good and bad. I'm going to talk about some of the changes we made to the way we behave. I'm going to talk about what some of the buzzwords or sayings mean to me. I'm going to talk about some of the things I would expect to see and hear in an organisation with a high performance safety. And as I said earlier, I'm going to give you the opportunity to rate where you think your organisation sits. The first buzzword I want to talk about is lead by example. What does it mean to me? It means no double talk. Your actions back up your talk. I'll explain what I mean by telling you a story. Not long after I took over steel treatment, I was walking up to the foreman's office, and I could see the building was full of red dust. The closer I got to the foreman's office, the worse it got. I could taste it in my mouth. I went into the office, and the first thing I saw was one of the operators complaining to the foreman about it and saying they should stop what they were doing. The operator concerned had a bit of a reputation as an old woman, and the foreman was saying something back to him like, "This is a steelworks, Fred. We have to expect things like this. Get back on the job." I told the operator I'd look into it and asked him to leave. Once he'd done so, I asked the foreman what was the cause of the problem. He told me they were reheating a ladle of steel and the baghouse wasn't working. Consequently, all the fume was leaking into the building. I told him to stop the reheat. His reply to me was, "Jim, if I stop the reheat, it'll mean stopping production." I told him I didn't expect my people to work in those conditions and to stop the reheat. He said, "Jim, you mustn't have heard me. If I stop the reheat, I'll stop the cast up." I said, "No, you didn't hear me. Stop the reheat by the time I count to 10 or I need a new foreman. 1. He stopped the reheat, the caster and production. A quick investigation by the maintenance people showed it would take a week to get the necessary equipment to fix the baghouse, but we would still be able to keep operating as long as we did no reheats. So after making sure everything was under control, I went to the main office and told my manager what I'd just done and why. His answer to me was one word: good. How many times have you heard someone say, "You can do it this time, but never again"? What are you really saying when you say something like this? How do you think others perceive that statement? I'll tell you what it means to me. It means I don't really like what you're doing, but I don't have a better idea, and production's more important than your safety, so let's keep going. The temptation was to finish the reheat, but that would have sent out the message production comes first. My boss's one-word answer was his way of demonstrating production didn't come first. A couple of years later, I got a phone call one weekend from a supervisor saying he'd just stopped the plant for safety reasons. Whilst my initial reaction was one to scream, "What?" and ask what alternatives he had, I didn't say either of those things. I told him I'd come in to support him. Once I got there and saw what and why, I thanked him. The original foreman in this story is now manager in BSL himself. He still rings me up occasionally to ask for advice. If you ask him, he will tell you up until that day he thought the safety push was all talk and the production did come first. He will tell you that day was the day he thought BHP was a respectable company for the first time. It was a game changer for him. Okay. Taking into account the stories I've told you, rate where you think you fit in leading by example. What else does lead by example mean? It means be fastidious about self-compliance. Comply with all rules and regulations. Follow all management policy and procedures. Stop picking which ones are relevant to you and comply with them all. If you can't follow them for any reason, make sure your boss knows. How can you expect your people to comply with their rules and procedures if you don't comply with yours? Wear all the right PPE. Keep it in good condition. Stick to the paths and walkways. If you're unsure of the requirements, ask someone. Don't just do it at work. Lead by example outside work. Don't use your telephone while driving. Don't get booked for speeding. Don't mow the lawn in shorts and thongs. If you make a mistake, don't argue about it. Thank the person who raised it and do what's necessary to fix it. It's easy to have the mindset, I'm the boss, the rules don't apply to me. I've got the experience and know-how. I'll be okay. That may very well be true, but the people watching don't know what risk assessments you've done or what your logic is. They just get the message that safety rule is not important. I was doing some work for one company where I asked the manager about a piece of equipment, to which he replied, "Let's go and have a look." He then took me and showed me the equipment I had asked about. It was only later I learnt we had entered a no-go area to look at it. What message did we just give all the operators who saw us? Do you think they really believe it's a no-go area? As a leader in the organisation, your actions are continually watched and interpreted by others. That means you have to be thinking not only about your intent, but the likelihood that others may have a different perception. Demonstrate the message. The same rules apply to all. Another chance for you to rate where you think your organisation sits. Have a look at the two extremes here and place a mark where you think your organisation sits. Another buzzword, visible leadership. Whenever I conduct a gap analysis, one of the first questions I ask shop floor personnel is, how do you know you're doing a good job? %90 of the time, the answer I get back is related to output or speed. Very rarely do things like safety, quality, costs get mentioned. This begs the question, what message is management and supervision giving them? I didn't always think like this, but I'm a firm believer people want to feel proud of themselves. They want to think they're doing a good job. If you can mentor your people in what you believe a good job is, you're much more likely to get one. So what's my definition of a good job? My definition of a good job includes safety, quality, cost, the environment, delivery performance, as well as output. Have a clear vision about this. Have a clear vision about the future, what it should look like, and communicate it with passion to your people. While this may sound simple and easy, it is not. It requires getting out of the office, being on site on an ongoing basis to talk to people about change and address all your employees' concerns. It means identifying negative reactions and barriers to change and knocking them down one by one. Initially, this takes a lot of time and effort, but in the long run, it saves you time for problem solving and bushfire fight. It's not a one-off communication. It's an everyday communication. Have a vision of the future. Don't be afraid to include challenges. Be passionate about it. Communicate it with pride. Another chance for a self-rating. Have a look at this. Good. Employees understand that there are many components to a good job. They include safety, quality, and cost, amongst others. Where does your organisation fit on this chart? The next segment I want to talk about is standard procedures. All safety jobs, critical safety jobs, should have standard procedures. These should be defined. Your people should be trained in them. These procedures should be regularly audited for accuracy, and your people should be regularly audited for knowledge and compliance. I'm going to tell you a story about a bloke named Jack Gazzalea. It's a very well-known story within BlueScope Steel. Jack was a shunter in the traffic department of the Steelworks. That means he was a loco driver's assistant. His job involved setting points, coupling, uncoupling wagons, etc. One of the rules was that a rake of wagons not attached to a loco must have the brakes on. One day Jack was riding on the leading wagon of a rake being pushed when he saw an out-of-control rake rolling down the line towards them. He jumped off but didn't get clear and was run over in the resultant collision and derailment. Jack died at the incident site. Jack's manager was a man named Bob. I played rugby against Bob, travelled overseas for work with him on one occasion, and whilst I wouldn't call him a mate, whenever we see each other, we stop and have a catch-up. Bob was visiting Jack's widow, and one thing Bob said to her was, "I don't want you blaming anyone else for Jack's death. It was Jack who parked that rake of wagons earlier in the day. It was Jack who should have applied the brakes and didn't." Jack's widow then asked Bob if Jack often broke the safety rules, to which Bob replied, "Yes, Jack had a bit of a reputation as a rule breaker." Jack's widow then said something like, "You're wrong. There is someone else to blame, and it's you. If you had done your job properly, you'd have either fixed him or sacked him. He might not have a job today, but he'd still be alive." I can tell you, if Bob was telling you this story here today, he'd agree with her. Not long after this fatality, we introduced a system we called job procedure checks. The job procedure check was a way of ensuring our procedures were correct, our people were trained, and they followed the procedures. The shift supervisors carried out the job procedure checks on the operators. As a manager, I sat in on a job procedure check every 6 months with each supervisor to audit them on the way they conducted the job procedure check, but more importantly, to demonstrate my commitment and support to the process. Have systems in place to ensure your standard procedures are correct and followed. Demonstrate your requirement to follow safety procedures. Another chance for a self-rating. Poor. There are little or no standard procedures. Those that do exist are not regularly checked for accuracy. Adherence to standard procedures is largely seen as optional by the employees. Good. Standard procedures exist for all safety critical jobs. They are regularly audited for accuracy. Personnel are regularly audited for knowledge and compliance. All personnel clearly understand the consequences of the non-compliance. Rate where your organisation sits. The next buzzword I want to talk about is tough love. Tough love is not about being demanding or aggressive. In fact, to practice tough love effectively, you need to remain calm and rational. Tough love is about being truthful with yourself and the individual concerned. And the truth is, no matter what is said or done by anyone else, unless the individual takes responsibility for their own actions, there will be no change in behaviour. The Oxford Dictionary defines tough love as the promotion of a person's welfare, especially an addict, child or criminal, by enforcing certain constraints on them and requiring them to take responsibility for their own actions. The bosses at the time would probably argue with me, but back in the 1980s, our industrial policy at the Steelworks was very much one of appeasement. It was don't rock the boat. Consequently, supervisors would give what I would call the 1,000 friendly warnings or instructions. I'm sure you know the type. Put your glasses on, Will. Will, put your glasses on. What happened as soon as the supervisor's back was turned, the glasses would come off again. Because there were no consequences for repeated non-compliance, there was no change in behaviour. In reality, behaviour deteriorated. As some employees realised there was no consequences for poor or unsafe behaviour, they pushed the boundaries. When we as supervisors and managers changed our behaviour and started to practice tough love, we brought about a change in our people. Many leaders are reluctant to set boundaries and provide feedback for fear that their workforce will not like them. Here's what Colin Powell, the American General and Statesman, has to say on the subject. Trying to get everyone to like you is a sign of mediocrity. You'll avoid the tough decisions. You'll avoid confronting the people who need to be confronted, and you'll avoid offering differential rewards based on differential performance because some people might get upset. Ironically, by procrastinating on the difficult choices, by trying to not to get anyone mad, and by treating everyone equally nicely regardless of their contributions, you'll simply ensure that the only people you wind up angering are the most creative and productive people in the organisation. The leader's role is to nurture and develop their people. To do that, you need to challenge them. Like doesn't necessarily come into it, but respect does. Earn your people's respect. Ensure the consequences of intentionally working outside the boundaries are known and understood. Apply those consequences in the way they are intended. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about tough love. The first one is about an alcoholic I sacked for attendance-related reasons. The day after I sacked him, a union official came to see me and virtually called me a murderer. Their logic was the employee only had two things they enjoyed in life, alcohol and work. And if I took away the work component, then the employee would drink himself to death in a fairly short period of time. I explained to the union official I was practicing tough love. And if the employee placed himself into rehab, got himself straight, proved to me that he was off the alcohol, and agreed to a period of random testing, I just might give him his job back. But he needed to make a choice between work and alcohol. He couldn't have both. The employee did as requested, and I gave him his job back. He remained at work, clean and a good employee for about 5 more years when he resigned for health-related reasons. About a year after I gave him his job back, the union official that originally called me a murderer said to me something like, "You know you saved his life, don't you?" The second story I can tell you about tough love concerns a father and son I had working for me. The father was well known and respected as a good, honest worker and had been in the department for many years. The son had only been with us a short time when we began to have a number of performance-related issues with him, compliance with rules and procedures, timekeeping, etc. We suspected his issues were drug-related, but had no real evidence to support this. Neither could deny that that was the case. I followed the standard disciplinary path of escalated warnings and suspensions and finally terminated his employment. The father actually came to see me about a fortnight before this happened to apologise for his son's behaviour and his inability to control him. About 6 months after I sacked his son, the father came to see me again. This time he wanted to thank me for sacking his son. He said it was the wake-up call his son needed. It forced him to face up to his drug problem and seek professional help. He'd stopped hanging with a bad crowd. His marriage situation, while still shaky, was much improved, and that he had found another job. Whilst the two stories I told you both involved dismissals, there were many more cases where the understanding of the consequences of continued poor behaviour brought about the required change long before this was necessary. The example you set, by imposing the penalties you said you would, sends a very clear and powerful message to the rest of the workforce. The actions of the manager are watched and interpreted by the whole workforce, and they adjust their behaviour according to that interpretation, be it good or bad. Do set parameters. Do provide both positive and negative feedback. There must be consequences for people who work outside the boundaries. Another chance for a rating. Where does your organisation sit with respect to tough love? Poor, little, no, consistent consequences for behaviour, or behavioural expectations clearly understood by all, consistent consequences of poor behaviour. The next thing I want to talk about is incident investigation. Be thorough. Identify the root cause. I'm going to tell you about two incidents clients of mine had. They're good examples of how we used to behave. This client cast smelling ingots into their molds. They have a rule that the ingots cannot be moved until at least 30 minutes after putting its cast. This is to allow sufficient time for solidification. One day when they were cooling some recently cast ingots with water sprays, ingots cracked open and there was a molten metal water explosion in which two people were injured. The investigation showed the crane driver knew this approximately 20 minutes after going up, so they suspended him. I asked a few more additional questions when I came on site a few weeks later, and it soon became apparent all crane drivers moved ingots early. The foreman knew about it, and whilst they may not have actively encouraged it, they certainly turned a blind eye to it because it gave the crew more time to set up for the next tap. If I had more time, I suspect I would have found that this practice exists on all shifts. The supervisors weren't doing their job properly. If the supervisors aren't doing their job and enforcing rules and procedures, then the manager can't be doing his. He either doesn't know what's going on in his area, or he too is turning a blind eye. Either way, he's at fault. Suspending a crane driver at the bottom of the tree won't change the manager's behaviour or the supervisor's behaviour, which is what was really needed. If you have a situation where several people are doing the wrong thing, then there is a problem with the leadership. You cannot solve the problem by working at the bottom when the real issue is at the top. For this incident, I believe appropriate corrective actions would have been around mentoring and coaching the manager, insistence to ensure the supervisors were enforcing all rules and procedures. Second incident I want to tell you about is one where a pipe that carried a hot powder became hold. The maintenance person sent to patch the pipe recognised that the depth of dust on the floor was an issue in his job safety analysis. His solution was to place pallets on top of the dust and to use the pallets as a work platform. At one stage of the repair work, the fitter was having trouble communicating with his helper due to the noise in the area. He moved to the edge of the pallet to get closer to the helper. The pallet overbalanced and the fitter stepped off it and into the dust. The hot dust got into his boot and burned his foot. The root cause was identified as pallet overbalancing, and the corrective action was the old standby, told to take more care in future. No one asked why the pipe failed. Was it an operator failure philosophy? If not, why wasn't it detected beforehand? No one asked why noise wasn't recognised as an issue in the JSA. Was the JSA conducted on site or in the field room? The incident happened at shift change time. No one asked if they were in a hurry to get out of there and get home, or how that may have contributed to the incident. There are a number of factors to this incident that were not identified in the incident report. Root cause was not determined, and the corrective actions are not likely to prevent similar incidents in the future. Have a philosophy of no repeat incidents. This means you must do a thorough investigation. The root causes must be identified. Corrective actions must address the root cause. And the final thing, audit your corrective actions. Come back 3 to 6 months after you put them in place and see if you still think they're going to stop a repeat occurrence. I can tell you, when I first started doing that, over 50% of the time, I added more or changed the corrective action. Another chance for a self-rating. Poor. Incidents are poorly investigated. Root cause is not determined. Repeat incidents are a regular occurrence. Good. Incidents are thoroughly investigated. Root cause is determined. Corrective actions address the root cause. Systems are in place to ensure corrective actions are audited for effectiveness. The next section I want to talk about is proactive goals and targets. The key here is to involve everyone. All supervisors in their team should be given proactive safety goals and targets to achieve. When setting targets like this, I like to think the target should be challenging but achievable. That is, not easy but not impossible. Whatever goals you set for your direct reports, set ones equally as tough, if not tougher, for yourself. If you want your supervisor to do 4 safety observations a month, you do 6 or 8. Your proactive goals and targets can include things like safety observation, timeliness of corrective action closeout, job procedure checks, job safety analysis, risk register audits, near-miss reporting, toolbox meetings. They should be measured and reported on monthly. Safety is too important to lead to a twice or once a year performance appraisal. Remember, one of the precepts of TQC is you can't measure what you don't control. As a manager, I had lots of KPIs to review each month. They included costs, quality, production, etc. I had various people to produce these for me. The accountant did the one on costs. The trainees did the one on production. The quality people did the one on quality. But I would gather the data for our active safety KPIs and produce them myself. Why? It made sure I fully understand what was going on in my area. It was a way of demonstrating how important I believed our proactive work was. I reviewed each supervisor's achievement against a target with him on a monthly basis. A review of the previous month's proactive work was the first item on the agenda of our OHS committee meeting. That was my way of demonstrating to everyone how important our proactive work was. Okay. Poor, little or no proactive work. Maybe the only person who does it is the safety professional in your organisation. Good. There's a wide range of proactive activity. Everyone is involved. Targets are set, measured and reported on. The next buzzword I'm going to talk about is never turn a blind eye. I've left this one for last because it's one of the most important. If you see something wrong, do nothing about it, then you're effectively condoning it. But it's more than that. If you don't see it, but the perpetrator thinks you have, you still effectively condone it. Therefore, when you're walking around a work site, keep your eyes open and be inquisitive. I was walking back to my office one day when I saw a crane lowering a ladle insert into a ladle. Steel ladle's just shaped like a big bucket, about 2.5 metres across the bottom, maybe 3.5 metres tall. The steel insert, the insert weighed about 100 kilos. I didn't think anyone would be in the ladle. I knew no one would be that stupid. But I thought I'd go and have a look anyway, just so people would see me. Sure enough, when I got down to the edge of the platform and looked down, there was someone standing in the ladle with a 100-kilogram weight suspended over his head. I immediately told the crane driver to move the loader away from the ladle and stop the job. When I quizzed the people performing the task, they saw nothing wrong with what they were doing, as someone had to lever the insert into its final resting place. I told them they weren't allowed to restart the job until they could tell me how they were going to do it with no one standing underneath the suspended load. Eventually they came up with some rules around rough positioning and fine positioning, where no one would get in the ladle or approach the load until the assistant was required for fine position. Effectively, they reduced the risk to an acceptable level by working on the exposure. A few years ago, I was doing some work for a stevedoring company, and they showed me a video of a fatality they had on a Melbourne wharf. They had rough and fine positioning rules in place. One more person would be alive today. Remember, act whenever you see unsafe, poor behaviour. Remember, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Another chance for a self-rating. Poor leaders in the organisation often ignore, don't see poor behaviour. Good leaders in the organisation constantly search for poor behaviour and immediately address any observed. I'm going to tell you one final story. Remember I told you I went 7 years without an LTI? That's true. But then 2 a.m. one morning, I got a phone call. Two of my people were on the way to hospital. There'd been a power failure, and in the subsequent recovery work, the fireball was unexpectedly created and 2 operators were burnt. I immediately had a quick shower, jumped in my car and drove up to the hospital to see the injured workers. Whilst I was driving there, I kept on thinking, I failed. These blokes are going to hate me. They're not going to trust me. They're injured because my systems and procedures weren't good enough. I failed them. What am I going to do to earn their trust and respect? How am I going to let them know I'm there for them? How am I going to make sure they understand I'm going to see they're okay? In short, I was expecting to be abused. That's not what happened. I arrived at the hospital about the same time they did. I was leaving to see them almost immediately. When one of them saw me walk down the corridor towards him, he shouted, "Jim, I'm alive. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jim, I was wearing my leggings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jim, I only wear them because I know what you'll do to me if I don't. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I used to think you're a bastard because you make us do all these things we don't want to do. But you're not a bastard. You're a good man, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that. Jim, if you ever need anyone to talk about the importance of wearing all your safety gear, I'll help you. I'm your man. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jim, you know those emergency training days we have? I used to think they were a bunch of rubbish, but they're so good. Everyone knew exactly what to do and we got help straight away. It was so good. Don't you ever stop doing that. I stayed in hospital with them for about 5 hours. In that time, they never stopped thanking me. Why did they thank me? I like to think they understood that all the work we had done in getting the basics right and our unwavering commitment then to maintaining that high standard had prevented the outcome of that incident from being much worse. Both operators made a full recovery and returned to normal work. The more seriously injured one had some precautionary skin grafts. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have one thank you like that than a million for being weak. Build your base strong. Never relax your standards. If everything goes pear-shaped, it may just save you. Remember the conversation Bob had with Jack's widow? Compare that to the one I had with my injured employees. Hopefully, none of us will ever be in a position where we will have one of these conversations. But if we do, my question to you is, which one will it be? Thank you.